Have you ever walked into a room feeling completely fine, and walked out questioning your sanity? Maybe it was a coworker who made a joke that didn't feel like a joke. Or a friend who somehow turns every conversation back to themselves. Or that family member who leaves you feeling guilty for things you didn't even know were crimes. You tell yourself you're being too sensitive. You replay the conversation in your head. You try to be more understanding next time. Kinder. More patient. Less reactive. And yet, somehow, you still leave feeling drained. So what's actually happening there? Why do some people feel like emotional black holes? And more importantly, how do you survive them without losing your mind, or yourself? Let's talk about toxic people. Not in the dramatic, cut everyone off and move to the mountains way, but in the psychological, grounded, practical way. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: you will meet toxic people. At work. In your family. In your friend group. Sometimes you can't just delete them like an app. So the real skill isn't avoidance. It's survival. First, let's redefine toxic. A toxic person isn't just someone who annoys you. It's someone whose patterns consistently erode your emotional stability. They manipulate. They guilt. They gaslight. They criticize in subtle ways that chip away at your confidence. They may play the victim, explode unpredictably, or demand constant validation. And here's the key word: patterns. Psychology tells us that human behavior runs on loops. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition. So when someone repeatedly uses manipulation, blame shifting, or emotional volatility to get their needs met, that becomes their default survival strategy. It's not random. It's wired. Now here's where it gets interesting. Your brain also has patterns. When you're around a toxic person, your nervous system goes into threat detection mode. Your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, lights up. Cortisol increases. Your body prepares for conflict, even if the conflict is subtle. That's why you feel tense before seeing them. That's why your shoulders tighten. That's why you rehearse conversations in your head. Your brain isn't weak. It's trying to protect you. But surviving toxic people isn't about winning arguments. It's about regulating your nervous system and protecting your psychological boundaries. Let me show you something subtle. Toxic dynamics often work because they hook into your identity. If you see yourself as the peacemaker, you'll tolerate chaos to keep harmony. If you pride yourself on being understanding, you'll overextend empathy. If you fear being seen as selfish, you'll avoid setting boundaries. They don't just push your buttons. They study them. Not always consciously, but effectively. And this is where survival begins, not by changing them, but by understanding you. There's a concept in psychology called intermittent reinforcement. It's the same principle that makes slot machines addictive. You don't win every time. You win unpredictably. And that unpredictability keeps you hooked. Toxic people often operate the same way. One day they're warm, validating, even charming. The next day they're distant or critical. That inconsistency creates anxiety. And anxiety creates attachment. You start chasing the good version of them. You tell yourself, they're not always like this. And that's true. They're not. That's the trap. So how do you survive? First, detach from the illusion that your love, logic, or loyalty will transform them. That fantasy keeps you stuck. Real survival starts when you accept patterns as data. Not potential. Data. If someone consistently leaves you feeling small, confused, or exhausted, that's information. Not a puzzle to solve. Second, learn the art of emotional neutrality. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It means refusing to fuel the drama cycle. Toxic individuals often thrive on emotional reactions. Anger. Tears. Defensiveness. The more reactive you are, the more the loop continues. Think of yourself as emotionally Teflon. Comments slide off. Not because they don't matter, but because you've chosen not to engage. This is sometimes called the gray rock method, becoming uninteresting to manipulative behavior. Short responses. No over-explaining. No emotional fireworks. At first, it feels unnatural. Your brain wants to defend itself. But over time, neutrality starves the dynamic. Now let's talk about boundaries. Real ones. Not the Instagram quote version. A boundary isn't telling someone, "You need to stop disrespecting me." That's a request. A boundary is saying, "If this continues, I will remove myself from the conversation." And then actually doing it. Boundaries are not about controlling them. They're about controlling your exposure. And here's the part no one likes to hear. When you set boundaries with toxic people, they often escalate. They push harder. They accuse you of changing. Of being dramatic. Of being influenced by others. That's not proof your boundary is wrong. It's proof it's working. Your nervous system might panic during this stage. You might feel guilt. That's normal. Your brain is wired for social belonging. Rejection feels dangerous on a primal level. But long-term exposure to toxicity is more damaging than short-term discomfort. Survival also means building internal validation. Toxic dynamics often distort your self-trust. Gaslighting, for example, makes you question your perception. That never happened. You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. Over time, you start outsourcing reality. So one of the most powerful survival tools is reflection. Journaling after interactions. Talking to a grounded friend. Checking patterns over time. When you document your experiences, you strengthen your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain that evaluates evidence. You rebuild trust in yourself. And here's something compassionate but important. Sometimes toxic people are deeply wounded. They may have grown up in chaos. They may carry trauma. Understanding this can create empathy. But empathy without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. You can understand someone's pain without volunteering to be their emotional punching bag. There's also a subtle shift that changes everything. Stop asking, "How do I make them stop?" and start asking, "Why am I staying?" That question isn't blame. It's power. Maybe you stay because of history. Because of hope. Because of fear. Because leaving feels harder than enduring. Be honest with yourself. Survival requires clarity. And sometimes survival means strategic distance. Not dramatic exits. Just less access. Fewer personal details shared. Fewer emotional investments. Less availability. Imagine your energy as currency. Would you keep investing in a stock that constantly crashes? Probably not. Yet emotionally, we do it all the time. Your energy is finite. Protect it. Let's also talk about something that doesn't get enough attention: your own triggers. Toxic people don't create insecurities from nothing. They amplify what's already sensitive. If criticism devastates you, there may be an old wound there. If abandonment terrifies you, there may be an attachment pattern underneath. Survival can become growth if you're willing to look inward. You can ask yourself, "Why does this comment hurt so much?" Not to justify them, but to understand yourself. And here's the hopeful part: the more emotionally regulated you become, the less intoxicating toxic dynamics feel. Chaos loses its pull. Drama becomes exhausting instead of exciting. Your nervous system recalibrates. You start choosing peace over intensity. And sometimes, the ultimate form of survival is walking away. Not with anger. Not with a speech. Just with clarity. You realize that protecting your mental health isn't selfish. It's responsible. The world often glamorizes endurance. Stick it out. Be the bigger person. Family is everything. But psychology teaches us something quieter. Chronic stress rewires the brain. Long-term exposure to relational toxicity increases anxiety, depression, even physical illness. You're not weak for wanting stability. You're biologically wired for it. So surviving toxic people isn't about becoming harder. It's about becoming wiser. It's about understanding how your brain works. How attachment works. How reinforcement loops trap you. And how boundaries free you. It's about recognizing that you don't need to win the relationship. You need to win your peace. And maybe the biggest mindset shift is this: toxic people reveal your growth edges. They show you where you overgive, where you undervalue yourself, where you fear conflict. They become unwilling teachers. You don't have to thank them, but you can learn from the lesson. If you're dealing with someone like this right now, I want you to know something gently but clearly: the confusion you feel is part of the pattern. The self-doubt is part of the pattern. The exhaustion is part of the pattern. But awareness breaks patterns. Every time you pause instead of react. Every time you choose distance over drama. Every time you trust your perception instead of their narrative, you're rewiring your brain. That's survival. Not dramatic. Not flashy. But powerful. And maybe that's the quiet truth underneath all of this: surviving toxic people isn't about changing them. It's about refusing to let them change you. So I'm curious, when you think about the most difficult person in your life, what pattern do you notice now that you didn't see before? What boundary might you experiment with this week? You don't have to announce it. Just try it. Observe what happens. Because understanding your mind isn't about escaping hard people. It's about learning how to stay steady around them. And that steadiness? That's strength. If this gave you something to think about, I'd love to hear your experience. And if you enjoy exploring the psychology behind everyday struggles like this, stay with me. There's so much more to unpack about how your brain works, and how to make it work for you. You deserve relationships that feel safe. And you deserve a mind that feels like home.